I told y'all I would get this in before the end of the year, and I'm delivering on that promise. Hi, hello, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Alex, and today we're finishing up talking about my favorite reads from 2021. I did part 1, and when I did part 1, I said, don't worry, I'll get part 2 in before the end of the year. Here I am. We're doing part 2. These are all books that I rated 5 stars that I read in 2021. When I first started my channel, I was like, it's too late in the year to talk about my favorite books. No, it's never too late to talk about some of your favorite books. So these are the second half of my 5-star reads from 2021. Before we get into it, make sure you hit all the buttons down below so you know when I'm posting. I post every week, and it's the week before Thanksgiving. So I'm filming today for today's video, and then I'm gonna film for next week's video too. So I'm literally going to be wearing the same thing in both videos. So yeah, we have to plan ahead. Let me just apologize. The sun. Do you see how bright the sun today? I don't know. And the highway noise today, I think it's the time change, because this is like not really any later than I used to film, but the sun is like right here. I'm trying not to like sit in it because I'm usually like right here, and obviously I can't sit there, right, because of the sun. So you're getting like, anyway, just bear with me. All right, let's get started. Okay, the first book I'm going to talk about today is We Are Okay by LaCour. I read this because basically everyone was talking about this book, and it was an LGBTQ book, so I was like, yes, of course, let's read it. I was not ready for how devastatingly sad this book was going to be. This book completely wrecked me. Like, I was just bawling through the whole thing. Okay, that doesn't mean it wasn't good. It was good. But I'm just telling you, it's a sad book because nobody told me that it was going to be sad. Everyone just said it's amazing. I need to be warned if I'm going to bawl through it, okay? And I did. So this book follows a young teen girl after she sustains a significant loss in her life. And basically she graduates from high school and just leaves her hometown, leaves all her friends, doesn't tell anybody where she's going or what she's doing. So we're catching up with her on her Christmas break from college, and her longtime friend and crush from high school has finally tracked her down and is coming to visit her. And it's just sort of this reunion between these two people, and we get all of her trauma story and her sadness and how she's moving forward and dealing with her life now. And it was beautiful, and it was sad, and the love story was just so everything. It was so tender, and I really appreciated this book because there was just a lot of undercurrent happening in this young girl's life. Like, for her to be this young and for all of these things to have happened to her was just devastating. And the way that she was handling everything was honestly like so inspiring almost. Like, she really was just doing the very best that she could, and her very best was honestly a lot better than what I would have been able to do. So people have been talking about it for a reason. So if you don't mind like kind of sad stories and things like that, this was great. The representation, like, it wasn't like across the board or anything like that, like but it was really sweet. The next book I'm going to talk about is Jonny Appleseed by Joshua Whitehead. I literally just talked about this book last week on my Indigenous Heritage Month post. I literally just talked about it, and I've talked about this book before. Like, last week's post was not the first time I've talked about this book. Here we are. This is I promise this is the last time I'll talk about it this year. If you want to hear me talk about it, I did talk about it last week. Go check out that post, and I'll just give you like a little recap here. This follows a Two-Spirit Ojibwe Cree named Jonny as he goes through self-discovery and self-acceptance after he leaves his home on the reservation and lives in the big city. It's a very highly sexualized book. There are a lot of really great points here. There's a lot of trauma in this story. Jonny is a very damaged character that is just really trying to make his life work. Like, he's really just trying to get through all of it in one piece and find happiness. I think that's really just all we all really want, and Jonny just really wants that. There's not really like an epic conclusion to this book. This really is just like a snapshot in time of Jonny's life. He's called back home for a funeral, and so we're with him for, I think, the week before the funeral when he's trying to get enough money together to go home. And there's not like, it's not a huge book either. It's pretty small. It's really easy to digest. Joshua Whitehead is a phenomenal author, and just the pain and the trauma that are in these pages, just, it's so effortless, and I just really enjoyed this book. So if you want some like really great BIPOC and LGBTQ representation, this is a really great book, but I will warn you again, it is highly sexual, so I really wouldn't recommend it for younger readers. But like, I don't know if you can tell, but I moved the camera a little bit. I don't really know how well that's gonna work. I might have to like legitimately relocate to finish filming. The next book on my list is The Roundhouse by Louise Erdrich. I also talked about this book last week on my Indigenous Heritage Month post, because it's another Indigenous book, and I absolutely loved this one. This book also was very heartbreaking, but I loved it. Like, I really did. Louise Erdrich is kind of on my list, like a callback list, so yeah. If you want to hear me talk more about that book, again, check out my post from last week, but I will talk to you a little bit about it here. This follows a young teen boy after his mother has sustained a very vicious and targeted attack. And it's kind of his story of how he tries to move forward and rectify the wrong that has happened to his mom. And it really gets into the dynamics of the laws that protect or don't protect Indigenous peoples on reservation land. So it really does get into kind of a deep dive about that, about like what the US government will do to help Indigenous peoples, and what's allowed and not allowed on reservation type law and things like that. It's messy. This book is messy and it's sad, and this kid is actually pretty young. I think he's like 14 in this book, so there's a lot of hard topics and a lot of hardship for this kid in this book, but it was just really well done. Definitely wouldn't recommend this for younger readers either, because it does have a lot of more like adult content in it, and it is just really sad. So okay, the next book I'm going to talk about is The Devil in the Dark by Stuart Turton. I've talked about Stuart Turton on my channel. I'll probably continue to talk about Stuart Turton on my channel. Okay, first things first, this book is thick. Okay, it's thick. She got a lot going on. There's a really big cast, and at times this book could be really hard to follow. You're gonna read it, buckle in, get like a notepad or something to keep track of everybody if you have trouble keeping track of characters, and yeah, just go with it. So basically I would describe this book as like a mix between Sherlock Holmes and Pirates of the Caribbean. That's the whole vibe I got off this book. Basically we open up with our main character. We have a lot of main characters, but we have one who's like a detective, and then he has a sidekick who stole my heart, okay? But he's basically being taken across the ocean to face trial for murdering someone, hypothetically. Like, he's being accused of murdering someone. And so he's like locked up in irons, about to go. And as they're getting onto the ship, something happens like in the dock area, and there's a curse put on the ship. we're dealing with people in like the 1800s, okay? So like people are extremely superstitious and religious and all those things. And so basically the ship gets cursed right before everybody gets on, and everyone that's on this ship is either extremely poor or like working on the ship, or extremely rich, like the elitists. Someone turns up dead, murder mystery ensues, and it's up to a few of the cast members to solve the mystery. There was a lot happening here. The pace was really good. It was really fun. Like it did have like a really fun element to it, and so I definitely think if you like murder mysteries and things like that, and also if you like historical fiction, this book would really work for you. Like, I'm not a big historical fiction person, but I actually enjoyed this book. Okay, I literally moved my seat to get out of the sun. Like, I hope this angle like works a little bit better, but it just looks like I reversed my camera. One of these days, like when I get my whole office put together, I'll give you guys like a little tour and you can kind of see like where I sit to do all my filming and stuff. But yeah, it just looks like I reversed my camera. The next book I'm going to talk about is The Space Between Worlds by Micaiah Johnson. This book just completely blew me away. I didn't really know what I was expecting, except that everyone was kind of talking about it. It's considered an LGBTQ book. The representation here was really great. If you like science fiction-y type books, if you like fantasy type books, if you like that show Loki about the multiverse and all of that, this book, okay? So we're following our main character. I'm sorry, I can't recall her name, but she is a world jumper, and there's only a couple of these, and basically what they do is they hop between multiverse worlds, and they're only allowed to go to worlds where their doppelganger or their other version of them no longer exists. Well, our main character has had like a very hard life, and basically it's mirrored in all these other dimensions that she's also had a hard life. So a lot of her doppelgangers are actually dead. So she has access to a lot of other worlds because there's not that many of her out there, until one day she gets zapped into another dimension where there is one of her, and she nearly dies, and then she gets kind of stuck there trying to get out. The darkness, the twistedness of this book, the trauma in this book, the way that they overlaid everything, it's like we're getting a whole cast of characters from the original dimension, and then we're getting all of those characters again, but in slightly different ways and with different views and personalities and like life goals and life paths and stuff like that. It was just so interestingly put together. It was such a whirlwind of everything, and I just fell in love with this book. Like I couldn't get enough. I couldn't get enough. This is a book that just lives in my head rent-free forever. It was just such a cool premise. Now, I do highly recommend this book, but I really only recommend it for 18 and up or so because there's a lot of sexual violence in this book. There's a lot of trauma in this book, and yeah, there are some really dark pieces here at play. So I definitely wouldn't recommend this for like YA readers or anything like that. I definitely only recommend this for older readers. This book it blew my mind. I absolutely loved it. And if you love any of those things that I mentioned, Loki, the multiverse, representation galore, like murder mystery, fantasy, sci-fi, like all of that's in there. This book has like a little bit of everything, and it's just so great. Read it. I'm so sorry, you guys, that I've been like struggling with the sun. I think I've got it fixed now. I'm just like trying not to get discouraged by how the filming today is going, but let's finish strong. The next book I'm going to talk to you about today is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Everybody's been talking about this book, okay? And for really good reason. I didn't really know what this book was going to be about when I picked it up, but then once I got into it, I was like, wow, this reads like a documentary. So it's like there is someone sitting there interviewing members of this band that were together in, I think it was the 80s, maybe it was the 70s. And they're all just kind of like telling their version of the same story and about how the band kind of like came together and made it big, and then why the band ended up breaking up. It really was just like sex, drugs, and rock and roll for everybody. And there was obviously a lot of animosity in the group. There was the main male singer, and it was his band, and they ended up bringing on Daisy, which was the female main singer, and they were just going to bring her on to do like a couple tracks with her to kind of like boost the album because she was like the next big thing that was happening. And then she ended up like joining the band for a little bit and just blowing everything up. And there was a lot of animosity in the group because some of the other band members like didn't like the direction that the band was going after they brought Daisy on. And of course there was like lots of substance abuse happening and things like that that also clouded a lot of what was going on. A lot of people say that this is like a parallel story to Stevie Nicks joining that band. Now I can't think of it. I'm sorry. My brain today, there's too much happening. But it's sort of like a fictional version of that story. Of course, like they've denied that and everything like that. They've said that it's not. This is probably what you consider like fan fiction for Stevie Nicks or something like that. The book was just in equal measure like fun and cool, but also like really sad. Like everyone was talking about this book and I read it and I just remember feeling sad. Really sad. Like it was really heartbreaking. And I've only heard a couple of other people say similar things like that they just felt swallowed by the devastation of this book. A lot of other people just said it was like a really fun read about like rock and roll and things like that. It just like broke me a little bit. The sadness of this book just filled every corner of me. I don't know, like, I still really loved it, and the ending, oh my gosh, the ending of this book just surprised me, broke my heart, everything. I felt everything by the end of this book. This was so interesting. This was just such an interesting read. I almost felt like you were a groupie or a roadie on their, like, little adventure to being big famous rock stars. So, yeah, I mean, it was a lot of fun. This book was a lot of fun. In equal measure, it was sad. The next book I'm going to talk about is the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. I talked about this book in my October horror lineup, one of my Spooktober episodes. Grady Hendrix just has my heart for nostalgic writing, and this book is nostalgic. Like, we're in the suburbs in, I feel like it's the 80s again, and it's just like 80s suburbia. What you could possibly imagine suburbia being like back then, this is it. And basically these moms get together and they start a book club so that they're not so bored and so that they kind of like don't have to just do the stay-at-home wife mom thing. Shortly after the book starts, a mysterious man moves in across the street from our main character. And immediately she thinks like something's a little off about him, but you know, she wants to be neighborly and friendly, so she goes over and helps him. And then just over time, weird things start happening kind of around this guy. Basically, this is a vampire novel. There's a lot of nostalgic writing. There's a lot of creep factor going on here. This book really plays the long game, okay? Because this book takes up like, I feel like it's like a 15-year time span or something like that. There's a lot of history that goes into this book, a lot of almost like folklorish type stuff going on, and then of course we have the vampire theme that's happening, and we have just the boom of the 90s and stuff happening in there too, because we transition because this book does play a long notch in time. Like, it's not a quick thing. We're in this storyline for a lot of years. So it was just really interesting. And the way that Grady Hendrix wrote it, clever. It was just really, really clever. Now, is this my favorite Hendrix book? No. This is not my favorite Hendrix book. But there were just so many little pieces of this book that were just sending me, that I absolutely loved. And then there was a lot of little pieces of this book where he does some really great gore writing. So I felt like I got a lot of everything in this book. He really just laid it on from every angle, and I really appreciated that. So yeah, if you haven't read it yet, people have been talking about it for a while. Like, it's a pretty popular book. So if you haven't read it, just go ahead and check it out. I don't think you'll be disappointed. The last book I'm going to talk to you about today is Us Against You by Fredrik Backman. I've talked about Us Against You. I've talked about Beartown on this channel briefly. Us Against You is the sequel to Beartown. If you have not read Beartown, I suggest you only read it if you are prepared to cry a lot and to be just devastated. And then when you think, okay, I've gotten through the devastation of Beartown, I can handle Us Against You. No, you can't. Because Us Against You will just come in and break the little pieces of your heart that you just put back together. Okay? Fredrik Backman just hit really hard with these books. They are heartbreakers, okay? There was no other intention that he had when he wrote these books besides to just mess up my life. Now, are they brilliant? Yes. Yes, of course they are. Of course they're good. Of course I love them. But in equal measure, I didn't really think that my heart needed to go through the meat grinder twice. Okay? And to top all of that off, there is a third book in this series called The Winners that came out, I think it was this year, and I have been trying to psych myself up to read it all year. And now that I'm in my sad part of the year, I can't do it. I refuse to do it. I think it will just send me over the edge. It'll be my 13th reason, okay? I can't handle any more sadness from Fredrik Backman. It will have to go into the spring lineup or something when my happiness is coming back naturally, okay? So, now that I've given it that glorious introduction, let's talk a little bit about Beartown. Beartown is about a small town where they primarily play hockey. I know that sounds like so silly, like it's a town that plays hockey. Like, literally, that's what they do. And I think it's like a factory town, if I'm remembering correctly. But the big thing they do there is hockey. And this is one of those programs where it filters young boys into professional hockey teams. Like, so it's extremely competitive. And it's kind of one of those things where, like, if you don't get into hockey after you graduate from high school, then you'll probably never leave Beartown. And Beartown's kind of sad. Like, it's just a sad place. It's one of those towns that's basically dying because factory work is shutting down. And this is a lot of kids' only way of getting out of that situation. We're following the hockey team, and at the beginning of the season, one of the members of the hockey team gets accused of sexually assaulting somebody. And the spiral that happens in this community is devastating. It's one of those books that just breaks your heart. Because let me tell you, the victim was not treated well. If you cannot handle books like that, or books that have sexual assault trauma in it, skip Beartown. Skip Beartown, please. Save your heartache for something else. Now, that's Beartown. And when I finished Beartown, I was like, it wrapped up very nicely. I didn't think there was even gonna be a sequel. Oh, there was. And so I had no idea what Us Against You was supposed to be about. No idea what Us Against You was gonna be about. So, of course, cracked it open. Us Against You is a continuance of Beartown, in a way, because we have a lot of returning characters from Beartown. There's not a lot of time that has gone that is commenced between Beartown and Us Against You. But the storyline shifts from following a specific set of characters to a subset of those characters. There's a lot of great representation in this book. There is a lot of love in this book. There is so much heartbreak in this book. This book, like, broke my heart so many times. Also, the pace of this book, not great. Oh my gosh, the pace was not great. But the fact that the pace was not really that good, and I still gave it 5 stars, I think says a lot to Fredrik Backman and the storyline of this book. Again, if you're tender-hearted, like me, and you go through the sad season, like me, this is not the time to read this book or this series. Save this for your serotonin high months when you can take a little bit of a beating, because these books will give you a beating, okay? I loved them both. I will read the winners. Eventually, like I said, it's probably going to have to go in my spring and summer lineup. Fredrik Backman is really a master storyteller. That concludes my 5-star reads from 2021. If 2021 had a theme, it would be sadness and heartbreak and devastation, because quite a bit of these books fit into this category. That's all I have for you guys today. Make sure you hit all the buttons down below so you know when I'm posting. I post every week. Next week we're going to talk about December maybes, which I'm going to film like right now. Yeah, I hope everyone is having a very nice November wherever you are. And I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye!